All right. What's up, people? My name is Gerald Coleman, and this is my buddy, Andrew Wyns.
What's
Buddy,
up?
I haven't used that word in a long time. Yeah, you know, for the daily office readings, right now the Old Testament reading is taking us through the book of Ruth. And so as I was reading, I just kind of got this thought that popped into my head about Naomi. I wonder if Naomi's character would say anything to us about discipleship. And so I called up my buddy Drew, who I know is passionate about making disciples and trying to figure this thing out. I was like, man, maybe we should have a conversation about Ruth and see where this takes us. And so he was down. And Drew, you want to say anything about who you are and what you do and why this interests you?
I'm a pastor of a church in New Paltz, New York. I have a church plant about 30 minutes south of us in Newburgh, New York, and I'm passionate about discipleship. I've been passionate about discipleship since I entered into the ministry, and it's one of my main things I pass on to people is you got to start finding your replacement from day one. So I'm constantly looking for what Scripture has to say about that, and I think this is a great discussion. And I loved the concept. As soon as you brought it up, I thought, yeah, this is something we should look into. So I'm really happy to engage in this.
Yeah, and I serve as a pastor here at a church called Grace Community in Detroit. But right now, my family and I, we're living in a little town suburb called Grosse Pointe, which is really different from us. So we've only been here for about 9 months, and I'm asking the Lord about who am I called to really invest my life into. I know there's ministry in terms of church programs, but really, my wife and I have been seeking to live our lives, and really, who are the people that God has called us to invest into, and how do we do that? So this is kind of this is new territory for me and trying to figure out who am I called to invest in and how do I make that happen. So that's why this interests me. So let's get into it. So we've got the readings that were from yesterday, and then we'll do the readings from today as well, which basically covered, was it just the first chapter or?
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much the first chapter. So first of all, let's just jump in and talk about what the book is. Let's set up the book pretty much in terms of what's happening. You've got Naomi, her family, Ahimelech, if I'm saying his name right, Elimelech. He's married to Naomi. They have 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion, and I've heard those names mentioned different in different texts. But they move with their 2 sons to Moab because there's a famine in Bethlehem, and which is totally different territory. And I've read where some people have felt that they weren't faithful to God in their moving, that they moved into kind of pagan territory. And, but I don't know if you have anything to say about that in terms of setup.
Yeah, I mean, Ruth is definitely, people focus a lot on Naomi and her husband and her sons moving into foreign land, into pagan territory. What's significant, though, is not so much that the story of Naomi going away from Israel, because we have that occurs with Abraham during times of famine, that occurs with the sons of Israel coming to Joseph, right? They're all in famine, and so that this kind of thing of going to a place where there's food is not uncommon. What's significant, really, in the story of Ruth is that Ruth, who's this Moabite woman, being brought into the Israelite community and accepted into the Israelite community. That's the significant nature of the book of Ruth. It's that the outsider the pagan, the other, if you will, coming into the chosen people and being accepted and welcomed in, and what that story and what that process looked like.
Oh, that's good stuff. That's very good. So let's talk about Naomi and her family. So tragedy strikes. Her husband dies, and not only her husband, but then later her two sons die. And it's just Naomi and her two daughter-in-laws, Ruth and Orpah. And what kind of stuck out to me when I was reading this yesterday and today is that, first of all, this has got to be crazy because it's tragedy, right? It's like, it's not anything you would write into your own story. This happens, and it's like, bam, this is hard now. These ladies are kind of left to fend for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so they've got to figure some things out. And so it turns out that in the story that Naomi hears news that God has visited his people in Bethlehem, and they've got food now. The famine is over. And so she says, okay, I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna return. And so she starts this journey back home, but now she's thinking about these two girls that are with her. And so she's like, okay, I want you to go back home and, go to your father's house. I really have nothing more to offer you. Go home. Maybe you'll have a better life there than what I can offer you. I don't know. What's ahead of me is the unknown. But you guys at least go back to your father's house. Maybe you can find a husband. Maybe you can start families, restart again. What does that say to you about discipleship there?
So what stuck out to me, first of all, was they begin to go on a journey. So the passage says that they started out towards Israel. So in this, Naomi is taking these two young girls to a place they've never been before, to a people they've never seen before, a culture that's foreign to them, a language that's probably foreign to them. And she starts them on the journey. So there's a beginning process here that's taking place. And then it's almost as if as they begin the journey, she comes to a point of saying, and this is going to be totally foreign for you. Why don't you stay home? So she gives them she releases them to leave.
Yeah.
Culturally, maybe releasing them from vows that they've made. In those cultures, dowries are paid. So in effect, it's possible that Naomi's family kind of possesses them, kind of owns them. And she releases them in verses 8 and 9 to go back to their families, to go and be with their own mothers. And the response from Ruth and Orpah is, no, we're going to stay with you.
Yeah.
Now, they've been married to their husbands for about 10 years, I think it says. So, you spend a lot of time with people, they're family. They're not looking to run away. But then Naomi insists. She insists that they go back to be with their family. And not only that, but she blesses them.
Yeah.
She says, may God's blessing be upon you. There's nothing for you where I'm going. I'm not, even if I had sons to offer you, by the time they grew up, you'd be old women, so they wouldn't bear you any children. Like there's nothing for you here. So she kind of gives them this opportunity to go back. And I see this in the sense of discipleship as the disciple and the discipler have this this engagement that has to take place.
Yeah.
So on one hand, the discipler wants to impart the wisdom or knowledge. In this case, I think, in our case, it's the Christian faith, to a disciple. This is the model that Jesus set up. This is actually a Jewish model of teaching and passing on the information and stuff like that. So there's this desire as the teacher to pass on the information to the student. And in that, I know this from personal experience, the desire can be so great that sometimes you're just kind of begging people, come on, I got some great stuff for you to learn. But then there's a lesson in what Naomi does here. Naomi's asking them to leave is not a rejection of them.
Yeah.
But giving them the option to follow on their own.
Yeah.
Oftentimes when we do discipleship, it's like, no, here's the rules and you got to follow the rules. And, and there's a discipline. We like the word discipline. We like to use that word, but there is a push and pull kind of thing that goes on in discipleship, where the challenge, if you will, is put forth and the disciple has to accept the challenge. If the disciple doesn't accept the challenge and doesn't walk in that, then to use kind of like a kung fu concept, the disciple is not worthy, right? If the disciple doesn't have that hunger to go after this deeper thing, then the disciple, to drag the disciple along, isn't actually producing anything. Right. So I think what I really saw in this first reading that we read yesterday was this opportunity that Naomi is giving to the girls to leave. And not once, but twice. So I think that's a real key thing in discipleship.
Yeah, I like that. As I was thinking about this, I was also looking at it, whereas, when you talk about the discipleship relationship, Naomi, if we're looking at her as a discipler, it seems as if her heart is really for these girls.
Yeah.
Her heart is for them. And when your heart is for someone, a loving relationship is not controlling.
Right.
And so she's not thinking, because she could have been thinking about her own advantage. Like, no, I need you girls to get hooked up so y'all can take care of me.
Yeah.
But she's not manipulating the situation to her own advantage. She's really looking out for the well-being of these ladies. She's saying, look, go home. I want you to have the best life possible.
Yeah.
And I think, too, in some relationships, I know in the tradition I grew up in, it wasn't uncommon to see people saying, I'm in charge of your life, and so I need complete obedience without any resistance at all. And you're not given an option. It's like, if you are here, I need your complete obedience. Whereas I see here is where Ruth gives the opportunity to voluntarily submission. And submission is voluntary. You have to volunteer to submit.
Yeah.
Only free people can submit, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah.
So, here these ladies have an out to choose. Okay, what do I really want? And this is kind of what I think Jesus talks about. It's like we have this option of this treasure in the field. Like, how bad do we really want this? If we really want it, we are going to weigh the cost. And so it's almost as if these girls have an opportunity. Here's what could happen if I do this, if I go home. Here's what could happen if I follow Naomi. And so I think the first lesson of a discipler is, what do I really want?
Right.
And I think I remember you telling me a story about if people want to learn about Judaism or follow a rabbi, that I remember you telling me a story that the rabbi would intentionally say, hey, I'm not teaching today. Go up the street, ask this person.
Yeah.
Just really to test or gauge how passionate they were about learning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the 11th century Jewish sage Rashi points out that Ruth and Orpah were probably not converted. They probably were not following any Israelite customs. They were probably worshiping their Moabite gods, which is why for Naomi, it's to say, it's okay for you to go. I think this is, discipleship is about a conversion process. It's not just about, creating levels of leadership in churches and stuff. It's literally, the process of transformation and allowing someone to speak into our lives, right? If you're thinking it from a discipleship process. And so, from the disciple perspective. So with Ruth and Orpah not being converted to Judaism or Israelite worship at the time, there's this kind of opportunity to go back into the world. And it's kind of like what you said, if you're only, how did you put it? Only free people can submit. If you really converted to the gospel, if you're really converted to the kingdom of God, then there's a desire in your heart to go deeper. And that's not to say that somebody might not be on that journey towards that conversion point and they're just not ready for it yet. So I don't want to put too fine of a point of saying, who's saved and who's not saved kind of thing to it, but more so that there's a place that somebody has to be in first in their relationship with God and their understanding of the kingdom and how that applies to them and to the world and as a whole, that allows them to see this. I need this. It's not just something that I have to do because this is the qualifications of being a Christian, right? It's I deeply need this thing. I deeply want to go further and convert more, if you will, be more transformed. And so I think that's a really significant part of the discipleship process as well. If somebody isn't at that point, they may be just kind of toe deep in the faith, trying to, still wrestling with basic fundamentals, and they're not at that point of wanting to go deeper. We could kind of look at maybe Orpah in this way, right? So she initially says, no, I'm not going to leave you, right? It's not till the second time that Naomi pushes that Orpah says, okay, I'm out.
Yeah.
Right. So there is, she's come thus far. She's entered into Naomi's household. She's lived with them for 10 years. They pack, they get on the road. They're heading back to Bethlehem. And Naomi says, there's nothing for you here. Turn back. And both daughters say, no, we will absolutely return with you to your people. We will be with your people. Yeah. Right? So there's this thing in Orpah that's coming this far. But on the second time, Naomi's a little bit more, how do I put it? She goes into a little bit more detail about how devastating it's going to be. That there's nothing for them. And, although when we're talking about the kingdom of God, there's everything for you. There is a sense that the deeper we go into the kingdom, the deeper our relationship with God is, the more sacrifice in our life is required.
Yeah.
The less self-centered we can be. No matter what it is, what topic we would talk about, when it really boils down to is sin is about being self-centered. It's about thinking that we can do this life without God and that we're better than him. So, at some point there's where you could, you kind of lay it all out, and all of the difficulty of the sacrifice of this journey, the person who's just toe deep, they're not ready for that. And they might have to back off and thank you. I got tea service from my beautiful wife here.
What?
Hi. Here, you can have this one, okay?
Good mint tea. So,
to be a little personal here, I guess what I'm thinking about in the moment, because we're doing this kind of off the cuff, and we haven't planned on what we're going to talk about today, other than the book of Ruth. Thinking about turnbacks, if we'll call them that, people who turn back. Like there could be people that I know. I can think of several people now that who I felt like, oh man, I want to give this person access to my life because I would love to invest everything I have so that they make it. And yet they have the choice to say yes or no. And so there's a couple of ways you could take that as a disciple. You could take it a personal way and say, oh man, what's in my life that is not attractive enough in terms of pointing them to the kingdom. Or, you could be like, man, I don't know. You could go into some pretty places if you're insecure. And I know I've wrestled with that, of several people who I wanted to create access, and either they just weren't ready, or that was too serious for them at the moment, of like, no, I'm okay with just going to church and attending and going back and doing my thing. I really don't want to know about what it means to be fully devoted. That's too serious.
Yeah.
That's too much. But then also of thinking of, man, is it something in me that, okay, am I not a good model of what it means to follow Christ? And what do you think about that?
No, I absolutely, it totally resonates. I mean, even, as a disciple myself,
yeah,
there are times when, listen, I've been the assistant pastor of the church that I'm at for 7 years, and I run all of the day-to-day parish life kind of ministries in the church, but I'm being discipled, and there's days where I wake up and I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to engage that far. I want to hold this one back. And so, I think, to be real, I think we all have those moments, right?
Yeah, that's true. I think too, the cool thing is that I don't look at Naomi as somebody who has a map of detailed, other than knowing how to get back to Bethlehem. She doesn't have a roadmap of the future.
Right.
And so she can't say, you're going to be abundantly blessed. You're going to be super wealthy, because God says if you follow him, your life is going to have this fairy tale ending.
Yeah.
She doesn't know that at all. The only thing she knows is that, she mentions that she feels abandoned by God, And this going back home is, I think, an effort of her pushing through that, of saying, you know what, I'm still going to go forward in this journey. I'm still going to pursue. And so I think too, looking at being a discipler as while we have a relationship with God, and there are things that we know about the faith, we don't know everything.
Yeah.
And we don't have to be experts, either. Of course, we've got to know something, but we don't have to have it all figured out.
Yeah. Well, I think it's we'll talk about just for a moment about Naomi's bitterness, and the word is Mara, which literally comes from the same root as salt. So we could say she's a little salty. She's curmudgeon-y at this point in her life, and that's actually speaks something to me. Like, if this could be related to discipleship at all, even curmudgeon-y people can be disciplers. Like, Naomi's life doesn't have to be all shiny and perfect and all her ducks lined up in the row for her to impart something to Ruth.
Yeah, that's good. She's not flawless, but she's someone who's a living example. I'm not flawless. You've seen my life. And so if anybody knows Naomi, these ladies have had access to her. And there's something about, and I don't want to judge Orpah, but she made her decision to go back or whatever, okay?
Right.
We're not told what happens to her. But then there's something to be said for Ruth, who looks and says, okay, I know there are unknowns in either direction. But the one thing that I do know is I know you and I know your life. And so because I know you, wherever you go, I'm going to go. Who's ever going to be your people, they're going to be my people, and your God is going to be my God. And so that says something for her, that she knows that her relationship with Naomi is something she doesn't want to miss out on. And she's learned something. There's something about Naomi that she has to love, that she says, this known and this relationship is better than the unknown.
Yeah.
I'm willing to follow you into the unknown, even,
Yeah, and that's exactly it. Yeah.
Man. All right. How long do you want to go before this thing gets, because if we post these, I guess we can't have them super long. We got to do.
I don't know. I think we've touched on these first two readings quite well.
Yeah.
I think it's a good place to stop. Are we going to come back tomorrow?
Yeah, I'm here tomorrow.
All right. So tomorrow we'll do the next reading, and if you want to follow along with us, you can look at the Revised Common Lectionary. Just look for what the reading is for the day, and read up on it and check us out.
Yeah, if you got any insight or things that you want to post, you can do that in the comments. And we'd love to keep dialoguing here. So thanks for checking it out.
Absolutely.
All right, bro.